This is UMass Hockey.
And O'Hara does something marvelous yet again!
Home to future NHL stars. 5 NCAA tournaments in the last 6 seasons. 2 Frozen Fours. And a national title.
Another shot, they score!
It's NewMass at a whole new level. Now, to get you pumped for all the Minutemen action on the ice, along with Nathan Strauss, here's the voice of the Minuteman, Jay Burnham.
Off the bench, Del Alce to the middle. Del Alce fires, he scores! Game winner! Del Alce!
And welcome back into another NewMass Minute, talking UMass hockey. And guess what? We're still playing the Minutemen in the semifinals in Hockey East coming up this weekend. Friday at the Garden. We need everybody there for a trip to the championship against Merrimack. Welcome into the podcast studio. I'm Jay Burnham, voice of the Minutemen. Alongside, no Nate today. We've got Colin Casey. We'll explain why we don't have Nate. Colin, good to see you, man.
Good
How
to
you
see
doing?
you. Yeah, he's dipping out at the toughest time of the year.
Okay,
yeah.
We were kind of giving him a hard time last week because you know how much he dedicates to UMass, and
Right,
especially
right.
the hockey program. And then he had an academic thing where they were in Spain for the quarterfinal game last Saturday against Northeastern, which we'll talk about. We slid you into the big chair on the radio side of things. Your impressions of the win for UMass against the Huskies?
It was one of the more complete efforts we've seen in the second half, Jay, and that's saying something because there's been a lot of those complete efforts in the second half for UMass. It was a game that was really even early on. We saw the opening goal that Larry Keenan got on the wrist shot, and it felt like UMass was going to take control of that game. Northeastern gets an answer late in the first period, and then you wondered, all right, is this going to be one of those ugly 2-1 games that could go either way? And then Jack Musa gets that huge goal at the tail end of the second period, and that really unlocked UMass for the third. Musa takes over, gets 3 points, the milestone 100 career points. Nestrasil picks up a goal, and it was a great scene. Another huge win at Mullins. Last 3 crowds at Mullins have been terrific, and UMass has delivered every time.
And I say this a lot because of my years in minor league baseball. When people say, oh, it's a postseason game, like it should be sold out. And you say, look, their game's not on the schedule. It's very hard last minute. So the job that the fans did, the marketing team did to get the crowd that we had there for Saturday was truly amazing. And students are still, out of
they were on break, and
so
still the community came out and showed out in a big time.
How did you – okay, so we'll get Nate back. He comes back to join you, and Donnie Morehouse will be at the TD Garden Friday at 4 o'clock against Merrimack, and then the championship game, if UMass wins, will be 7 o'clock on Saturday. You mentioned Jack Musa. He hits the 100-point mark in his career. How did you describe that goal that he scored?
Well, it kind of came as a little bit of a surprise because initially the play before that was a pass from Musa to set up, I think it was Jack Galanick going back to the post. I can't remember, but it was a near goal. And then as UMass started to regather in the attacking end, the puck just found Musa on that right side, and he got the initial shot off. A Northeastern player ended up blocking it. So I just kind of went, second effort, and by the time I said that, puck was in the back of the net, right over an all-hockey second-team selection goalie in Lawton Zachary, who I thought was really strong despite the loss for Northeastern in that game. And Musa had to put a perfect shot on goal. He did, and what a lift it was, tail end of the second period. Maybe some of those nerves would creep into the third if you're UMass knowing what's at stake, trying to get into there, although this is a team that hasn't shown a whole lot of nerves in the second half of the season. But for Musa to get that goal, it was just a huge lift off of that the shoulders of that team, and they kind of put themselves in position in the third period to realize, all right, guys, we still control our destiny like we have this entire second half of the season. And they went out, and Musa with a great drop pass to Nestrasil to get his third point, get Nestrasil his third point of the game as well, and for Musa that milestone marker. Just terrific game from that first line.
Nestrasil, 31 points on the season. He wins another Rookie of the Week award for his hardware this season. Been a tremendous freshman for the Minutemen. And obviously, Michael Robel in goal. We can talk about that in a second. But there were times where it felt like Northeastern kind of controlled a little bit in that game.
Yeah, and it was a big reason why it was Dylan Ritzkovian, because he's that game changer forward that not a whole lot of teams in Hockey East have. Ritzkovian was a second-team selection for good reason, but he was making some really good passes that I think forced UMass's hands defensively. You know, there were a couple of times where there were trailers that Northeastern hit the defenseman coming over the line, and they got some great looks on Michael Robel, but the problem is you need grade A scoring chances to get one past Michael Robel, and it just felt like Northeastern just couldn't find a way to really threaten Robel, who made 30 saves, but he made them all look relatively easy, which is what he does at this stage in time.
And so you're watching, there was one game on Friday night, that was the BC Maine game, and then so BC wins. And then UMass is one of the earlier games on Saturday night. You're wondering, okay, we win, UMass wins. Who's going to be the opponent? And you're thinking Providence versus Merrimack, number 1 seed Providence. They've had a tremendous year, 54 points. UMass finished second with 43 points to give you an idea of how dominant they were. And Merrimack stuns them in OT. What were your thoughts on that contest?
So I wasn't as surprised as I think some people might be. And the reason why is because while UMass has been going on the second half run, Merrimack quietly has been one of the better teams in the second half of the season for Hockey East.
Despite the fact that's when kind of UMass started to springboard their season, right? They won back-to-back games against Merrimack.
Yeah, those were two of their only few losses in the second half of the season, which people kind of forget about the whole thing. But Merrimack was in control in that game. Going into the third period, they had the lead, and then there was this crazy deflection off of John Mustard's stick, ends up getting behind Max Lundgren, forces overtime. So you think, all right, at home, Providence, overtime, regular season champs. They've got all this talent. They've got Roger McQueen. They're going to find a way to get this victory. And sure enough, one of the bigger transfer stories in the conference this season, Trevor Hoskin, who's been terrific, a Calgary Flames prospect. Yep, I know you'd love that one. Ends up scoring a high-level goal scorer's goal over Jack Parsons, who's been terrific for the second half of the season for Providence. And sure enough, Merrimack's going back to the Final Four at the Garden for the second time, I think 4 years, 2022. They ended up going back there and lost to BU in the title game.
And sidebar, you had mentioned to me before we started filming, we were talking about these matchups, and it's BC and UConn on one side, UMass and Merrimack on the other. Winners will play in the championship. This hasn't happened for UMass in Hockey East taking on Merrimack in the tournament.
Yeah, you got
at this level.
All the way back to 1972, Jay, which is that was the ECAC 2 conference at the time, and they played in the semifinals of that tournament. UMass would get a 4-2 victory, and they beat a team by the name of the UB Buffalo.
Go Bulls.
Yeah, the Bulls. That they don't even have a program anymore as far as hockey goes at the NCAA top level. So for that to be the first meeting in 54 years between these two teams is remarkable. But it also tells the story of these two programs and the strides they've made over the last decade, especially Merrimack the last couple of years. They made the NCAA tournament. Scott Bork's done a terrific job with that program. But at the same time, UMass has consistently been the team that you expect to be there at the end in Hockey East and in the national tournament, and right on the doorstep to getting there.
Let's talk about it. Okay, so first of all, obviously a win on Friday would go a little way to help UMass in their at-large conversation. At this point, you're saying, hey, let's just win the whole thing, right? UMass has been to 3 title games in Hockey East tournament format that it currently stands in. 2 of those in the past 5 years under head coach Greg Carvel. The other one, I think, was back in the early 2000s. So it doesn't happen a lot. And their 8th semifinal, but you're looking at the math now and the MPI and the cut lines and who's winning in other conferences. How does it all shake out? Give it to me like I'm 5 years old.
Yeah.
How's it standing
out?
Yeah,
so there's definitely eyes on a couple other conferences, and the most pressing one I would say at the moment is what's going on in the Big Ten. And the big surprise is Ohio State, a team that really struggled in the regular season. The Buckeyes found their way past Michigan State to get to the Big Ten championship. They'll play against Michigan, who they've lost to in 4 games in the regular season. But as you know, beating a team 5 times in a season, doesn't matter what conference you're in.
Beating them twice in a season is hard,
that's going to be difficult. So that's a potential bid stealer that moves.
So
UMass
UMass fans are rooting for a Michigan win over Ohio State.
Yes, you're hoping for the Maize and Blue to pull that one off.
Okay.
On the other side, just down the road in the ECAC, you've got 4 teams remaining. It's now a single elimination, so the best of 3 series, the quarterfinals, no longer have to worry about that. You've got Dartmouth and you've got Cornell that are both in that semifinals. they're in the NCAA tournament no matter what. You want those teams to come away with the conference championship.
Either one of those to get the auto pick.
Exactly.
Okay.
So then you have the other two teams. The big surprise has been Clarkson. They beat Quinnipiac, which is a program that, for whatever reason, has just fallen short year after year in the ECAC tournament, despite winning a national championship and being a perennial national contender with Rand Pecknold. But Clarkson's in, and Princeton also in the semifinals. Those two teams you do not want to see move that cut line by winning the ECAC championship. So you like the chances of Big Red or Big Green to come away with that title.
We saw Cornell earlier. I mean, they're great team.
Yeah, but even they needed three games to beat Harvard. They needed Sunday to get a victory over Harvard, get into the semifinals, and that's the volatility of college hockey. All it takes is...
So you need a little chalk is what we're hoping for, right?
Yeah. You want everything to go as expected, but it's never that simple, and I think that's why UMass, they focused it on one game at a time all second half long. They know that if they just win 2 games, they're in. Don't even have to worry about any of that outside noise.
Right. I mean, it is, and it's like, had it been just a little bit better for the Hockey East non-conference schedule, you're talking about maybe not just UMass, BC. They have to win the tournament to get in at this point, from what I understand.
Yep.
So, UConn's right there as well on the cut line. So a lot at stake at the TD Garden, and you hope that the UMass fans show up for this one, baby.
They will. Yeah. They always do. Yeah, it's that's the thing about like home ice advantage, and I'm not doubting that they're going to show up. They're absolutely going to. But the fact that UMass is almost dead even splits home and road this year has me feeling really good about their chances to come away with victories at the Garden. 11-6-0 on the road, 11-6-1 at home. So they are an identical team. Doesn't matter the environment. They're ready to play.
You mentioned 100 points for Jack Musa. We'll credit Nathan with this stat. He said he was the third 100-point player under Coach Carville in his 10 years. Pretty good company here. Bobby Trevino, former player of the year in Hockey East, and John Leonard. So to be in that company, I think, speaks to the impact that he's had, not only on the ice, but for this program, kind of carrying the torch last couple of years. Yeah,
and, similar players, all, left-handed shots, wingers that have been,
Pains
really,
in the butt.
Yep, difficult to play against, but as consistent as offensive players as you'll see come into Amherst. I mean, John Leonard had that incredible 2019-2020 season where it felt like he was putting up multiple goals down the stretch. It's a shame we didn't get to see how it would play out at the national tournament level, but he leaves and the mantle was passed to Bobby Trevino for the course of the next couple of seasons, and they got a chance to play together, of course, but for Trevino, it was just the fabric of that program and that championship run the following year, and just the character, the personality of Bobby Trevino won't be forgotten for decades, for centuries beyond that. And
in his own words, too, by the way.
We won't use those words specifically. And then with Jack Musa, you've seen the same type of consistency. He put up almost 30 points his freshman year, and he's hit that mark and improved his game every single season. And, Greg Carville talked about how this probably his last home game, the 3-point performance he had against the I forgot who they played already, the Northeastern Huskies. But to close out what could be his final home game if he goes on to the professional level following this year, what a way to stamp it, and he knows that he doesn't want this ride to end. So that top line was terrific on Saturday, Jay, and Jack Musa playing alongside 2 freshmen in Jack Galanick and Václav Nestrasil.
I mean, they've just been tremendous, and I think, look, we talked about it a lot of times. When things are down, especially early in the season, they lost so much, especially up front. And you heard Carv say that time and time again. And then after the break, it hits a stride where you're saying, oh, Justin Kerr is now getting things offensively going. You're getting points from the blue line. Owen Murray stepping up, Ovalstad as well. Those are your senior leaders. But now you're seeing these guys who at the beginning of the season, I think hard on the expectations to say you're going to step in and take over for 5-6 guys that signed NHL deals. And it took a little time.
That gets forgotten about, I think, because of how long the season is. You forget
Cole
O'Hara, Idar Sunyev, Don Schmelis, Kenny Connors, number of others, Lucas Mercury, all guys that left that forward group, and you had to wonder where was the scoring going to come from. You were able to retain your top 4 defensemen with Murray, Olvestad, Keenan, and Del Elche, but you still got to find the goals. And I think really from the second weekend of January, where UMass had those two 1-0 games they split against BU on, they've gotten it in a scoring by committee. It hasn't always been Musa and Nestersil who are far and away at the top. You've seen the stretches like Justin Kerr had that stretch. Lucas Kolechka has chipped in 8 goals. He's tied for third on the team, which I think a lot of people wouldn't have expected coming into the season. And you know, you get goals from up and down the lineup. There's been a remarkable amount of trust in the whole group for this coaching staff, and it's been reciprocated from staff to players, from players to fellow players. The trust on that team has been like remarkable to watch over the course of the second half of the season. It's the trust and the self-belief. That's the two things that have come to mind for me for UMass and why they've been on such a huge run in the second half of the season.
And the keystone being the guy in net, Michael Robel, who, as we record this, we're recording this on Tuesday of this week. We might get it out Wednesday. Awards are coming out, the major awards. It's a major award. Major awards are coming out from Hockey East. Coach of the Year, head coach Greg Carvel's up for that. We'll see. You know, Nate Lehman for Providence. We talked about, you know, how they just kind of separated themselves from the pack. And then you've got Michael Robel up for potential player of the year. I mean, UMass has had a couple. We mentioned Trevino and McCarr. But, I mean, such an honor for him to be even considered. But I think the weight of his importance on this team, you would hope comes into play, and to see how much, you know, he can get the job done. Do they consider that in the voting of him potentially being player of the year in the league?
Yeah, I mean, you got 3 terrific players in the nominees on that list, with Robel, James Hagens for Boston College, and Cole Hudson for BU. You know, BU had a bit of a disappointing season out in the quarterfinals, not going to the NCAA tournament despite beating the.
Does that factor into some of the
exactly. Despite being the preseason number 1 in the conference, to fall that short, you wonder if that might be the case. But even if you factor that in, James Hagens had, I think, 7 more points in conference play than Hudson. So, in my mind, it's a 2-horse race between Hagens and Michael Robel, and it comes down to what you value, whether it was, you know, the ability for Michael Robel to steal a couple of those games in the second half and be as consistent as he's been. Do you value that level of goaltending and that capability, or do you value for James Hagens? I mean, he's had like every other one of their points throughout the second half of the season. He's been a huge reason why the Eagles
led the league in goals.
Led the league offensive stats, all that. So it's going to come down to, I think, what the voters kind of base their vote off of. And I think you could give the award to either player, and, you know, you won't hear too many complaints out of me. But as far as the value goes with what Michael Robel's done in the second half of the season, he's not only been the best goaltender in Hockey East, you could argue he's been the best goaltender in the country since the start of January.
Which would lead, and we'll find out again about the league awards this week, which would lead to the Richter Award. I think they're going to try. I was told they're going to trim down the list to the finalists, which would be 3.
Yep.
Hopefully this week as well. You'd have to have his name on there from what he's done this season.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, you know, I think it was the start of January is more of a discussion like, all right, Robel's been really hot. You know, he got off to a slow start, so how are his numbers going to factor in? But when you consistently give up 2 goals or less the entire half of the year, those numbers are going to continue to improve, and that's exactly what's happened. So then you have guys like Trey Augustine with Michigan State. Augustine, of course, was a nominee last year, and that Michigan State Spartans team has been terrific. They went out a little early in the Big Ten Conference tournament. Again, I don't know how much they're going to factor that in, especially because, you know, it wasn't obviously all on Augustine that they lost that game to Ohio State. And then you've got, you know, Augustana and Josh Kotai, who's been really terrific all season long, led them to a 20-win season. So you've got so many different nominees. But I think the narrative's really started to shift in favor of Michael Robel when you see, okay, UMass is now a 20-win team based on what they did in the second half of the season. Michael Robel has kept them in games. He's won them games. Yep. And now you look and see, okay, UMass could find their way into the NCAA tournament, and I don't think there's anybody that wants to see Michael Robel in the NCAA tournament. If you ask Northeastern, they probably weren't too happy to see him in the quarterfinals after a hard-fought victory over New Hampshire. That's just he's that good where it doesn't matter who's on the other side. UMass has a chance to win.
Here are the numbers. 198 goals against, 936 save percentage. And to think that it was below, 880 at one point, 890 at one point at the start of the season, it tells you how he's done. By the way, we should also mention there was a stretch there where UMass needed Jackson Irving to step in, and he did so admirably. I mean, they needed him. Robel had been hurt. I know it's probably tough for a guy who's quote-unquote the backup, but he's proven that he can get the job done in this league. Hopefully he gets a chance at some point. So I just wanted to kind of spotlight him a little bit, because the conversation has been about how Robble is so good. Doesn't mean UMass doesn't have two goaltenders.
And I think you have to give credit to Robble for that game at Northeastern to close out the first half of the season. They won I think it was 1-0 shutout until an empty netter, but he got a shutout on the road to close down Matthews Arena. Last ever shutout at Matthews before that building closed.
December 7th.
December 7th. And Greg Carville, when I spoke to him before the Northeastern game on Saturday, talked about how that's a turning point of the season. Gave them an opportunity to reset and end the first half on a high. And he said he told the group that he believes in them after that, and they had that in their minds when they went home for break, and they kind of had that ability to find that self-belief in the break and going into the second half. And you saw it come out in that first series after with BU. Michael Robble was back in net, but the team in front of him, defensively, they've been a completely different team in that regard. And Larry Keenan and all Hockey East second teamer for good reason, but it's been an entire group effort. 6 guys played 13 or more minutes in the game on Saturday against Northeastern. Charlie Lieberman came in and played some heavy minutes. This is a guy who missed all of last season, was in and out of the lineup this year, and he's built that trust down the stretch. Landon Nyes missed some time towards the end of the regular season. He was back in the lineup, got some looks on Saturday. So this is a deep team that has a lot of trust from its coaching staff. That's not a team you want to play against because they don't have any fear going into a playoff game.
Last kind of note is that they once again are the team that doesn't shoot themselves in the foot. They don't take dumb penalties. What I'm looking at, 6 penalty minutes per game. I mean, under 3 penalties per contest. And so they don't give the opponents the chance to take advantage of a lot of mistakes that they don't make.
Yeah, that's a tough team to beat, and I think it's them and Dartmouth that have been neck and neck for the national lead in that regard. You look at what Dartmouth's done with Reed Cashman this year. They're in the semifinals for the ECAC, but they're making the tournament for the first time in 46 years, and that tells you just how important discipline can be at this level and keeping that level head, because there's been some really good teams over the last several years that have been great teams but derailed because they can't stay out of the box. Penn State's been a team all year that's been one of the most penalized teams in the country, and they're a really talented team, but it's a big reason why they find themselves, watching the Big Ten championship game and also just barely being in that at large. They've kind of lost a little bit of steam down the stretch, but if you can play that consistent brand of hockey, you don't cheat the game, you play with that integrity, it's a huge basis of just being in a position to play great hockey, because all right, we're going to be 5-on-5 for a lot. If we can be great at 5-on-5 and we're playing it for 90% of the game, we're going to be in great shape. And that's exactly what UMass has done. Not just in the second half, they did in the first half as well, but they've taken advantage of it in the second half and have become a much better 5-on-5 team than virtually anyone they've played against in the second half.
You're going to be at the Garden. We're going to put a headset on you and send you, hopefully, down ringside. If we can't get access there, if you see Colin roaming about the TD Garden, stop him, say hi. He'll put you on the air if you get a chance, and just get to enjoy the moment. I know it's something that you, Donnie, Nate, our broadcasting trio, have really lived and breathed UMass hockey for so long, and just it's such a nice ride to see them get to Boston.
It absolutely is, and it never gets old. I got here as a student, Cale McCarr's freshman year, and when I got here, I knew I wanted to get into broadcasting, and I didn't really pay much attention to thinking about hockey would be that avenue. I knew UMass as, the Marcus Camby, the basketball history of the school. How it's changed in the last 9 years since then has been remarkable, and it's been such a joy to watch the growth from a team that was just in Hockey East to a team that is feared in Hockey East and is a national champion. So it's I'm really excited to see what this group can do. They deserve to play in the NCAA tournament based on what they've done in the second half. Of course, it's math for a reason. They have the formulas to determine that.
Let's twist this a little bit, because there's so much conversation about the NCAA men's basketball and women's basketball brackets. You don't get those conversations with hockey because it's all numerical. If there were a committee and it was like they do it in basketball, I think I heard Rick Pitino say this for St. John's, hey, it used to matter how you played the last month of the season versus the first month. I think if there were a committee, they would say point blank, UMass second in Hockey East.
Right.
Make it to the semifinals. There's no doubt you're an NCAA team.
Yeah, I mean, if you could finish in the top 3 of your conference and you're in Hockey East, like I think that would obviously mean something. But you add in the context of how it's been a bit of a down year for the conference. And I say down year, there's been more parity because of the last place team in Vermont had the most wins out of any last place team in Hockey East history. So, yeah, if there was a committee, I think that would be an interesting discussion because you look at what UMass has done in the second half, and it would be, yeah, this is a team that looks ready to compete for a national championship.
Have you looked at, because the NPI is the new model that we use, previously the pairwise, and we were told at the beginning of the year there's not a big difference between the two. Have you looked at what it would be where UMass would be in the pairwise and how their NCAA?
So last look, and I think this was before Sunday's results, but last look I saw they were 13th in pairwise.
And
if that
NPI
was the case.
is
14, yeah, or 15. Again, it changes so often, but
the difference of 1 or 2 spaces.
Yeah, but on top of that too, Jay, the 13th they were in pairwise, there was a big gap to 14. So as far as that cushion in the decimal points between 13 and 14, which could make all the difference in the world.
So we're just going to use pairwise then, right?
Yeah, I was always huge on
benefit,
pairwise, and I wouldn't have liked to change. No, but it's the bottom line is this: UMass knows what's at stake to get in at this point. 2 wins, and you don't have to pull out a calculator, an abacus, whatever you're using to crunch the numbers. You're in no matter what. And you look at the 4 teams left. And they've all had their moments throughout this season, but for the second half and what we've seen since the start of January, there's been no team more consistent than the Minutemen, and they have to.
I mean, it felt like at times UConn, BC, they were pretty good position to get an at-large bid, and now that's not the case heading into the semifinals.
Yeah, if you look at BC, they lost the game against UMass on the road. They lost those 2 games against Boston University, and that's what's put them in a position where they're just going to be, even if they were to win the semifinals game and then lose in the championship to UMass potentially, still on the outside looking in. That's why you can't take any games off in Hockey East because they will come back to bite you. And luckily for the Minutemen, they haven't done that because their 3 losses in the second half, Jay. 1-goal loss to BU in January. They had a 1-goal loss a couple of weeks ago on the road in Durham against UNH. 1-0 was the score, and they were down 2-1 at Lowell and lost.
Game where they played Lowell like 3 times.
Yeah,
in a 10-day
tough to beat anyone 3
yeah,
times in a row, and it was 2-1. Pulled the goalie, lost 3-1. These have all been like marginal losses, so it has been a remarkable second half. I know I've said it probably 100 times in this 20-minute span.
I mean, it just, and like we try to quantify it when all is said and done, but it really has been. And I think it goes to the leadership of this program where you don't get distracted. And shoot, we saw that even go into the COVID year and the national championship year where the guys had to literally live in a bubble and went the entire season, regular season, without one positive COVID test. I mean, that's how disciplined they were when you see all these other teams having issues. And I think that speaks to what Coach Carve and his staff were able to do, where they're able to get guys lined up, focused on the right things, and not look ahead, not peek behind, and just stay on course.
And you know why that helped especially, too, is because even when you do everything right, sometimes life gets in the way. That's what happened in the semifinals game with Philip Lindbergh being unable to play due to the COVID guidelines. Matt Murray had to step in against Duluth, and he was next man up situation. Murray was terrific in that game. They go to overtime. Garrett Waite, the winner. They were dominant in that overtime period. I remember calling that game from Pittsburgh, and it was it's a testament to why that structure, that discipline can put you in a position to succeed no matter what the case is. And it's not just here, it's life after college hockey. And we've seen countless examples over the last decade of guys succeeding beyond the Mullins Center and what they've done in the UMass uniform.
Oh, Colin, it's been great having you in here. Well, if you see him, say hi. On Friday, the pregame show will start at 3:30, presented by Milton Cat at the TD Garden. Colin, Donnie, Nate, I'll be around as well. So good luck.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll have a few more of these to do.
Yeah, I'll be sure to get there. Try to aim for 11 a.m. knowing Boston traffic. I don't want to take any chances on Causeway Street. Yeah.
All right. Big thanks to everybody. We hope to see you down at the Garden for the semifinals, UMass and Merrimack, a chance to play in the championship on Saturday. He's Colin Casey. We miss Nathan Strauss. To get him back soon. Until next time, I'm Jay Burnham saying so long from Amherst.